Have you ever wondered what it takes to create a career plan? Even if you're a student and you think you don't have anything figured out, the guest of this episode is going to help you walk through the step by step process of creating a career plan that is both going to be fulfilling for your career as well as align your goals, your mission with your career opportunities down the road. Welcome back to another episode of the Engineering Future Podcast. I'm your host, Luis Duque, and this week I talked to Mark Herschberg. He's the author of the Career Toolkit and overall an engineer that is doing a lot of amazing things in his career and is creating these resources for us to develop a career plan and help us better align our mission and our goals with our broader career and finding that passion in everything we do in our lives. From tracking criminals and terrorists in the dark web to creating marketplaces and new authentication systems, Mark has spent his career launching and developing new ventures at startups and Fortune 500s as well as in academia. He has helped develop some amazing courses and resources for students at MIT. And honestly, this book kind of brings everything together and gives us a solid plan to develop that career plan and that career mission that we're all looking for. At MIT, he received a Bachelor of Science in Physics, a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, and a Master of Engineering in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, focusing on cryptography. So he's doing some amazing things. He has a lot of experience, and he is truly just giving us a lot of resources with this book. And overall, in this episode, we'll be touching about what are some of the steps that we can do as young engineers, or if you're a student, to help us develop that career plan and just get ourselves ahead of the crowd and just find something that we're really passionate about and implement that within our career. So if you're a student, a young engineer, trying to figure out what's going on with your career, with your life, this episode is exactly for you. And I am so happy that I got to talk with Mark. He just kind of runs us down through his book and overall just gives a lot of great insight into how to develop that career plan, which I think is super important. So before we jump right into the conversation for today, I just want to give you a huge thank you. If you have read and reviewed the show on Apple Podcasts, it really helps get the word out there and just overall improve the quality of the show, hearing your feedback and just sharing with everyone out there. If you have not read and reviewed the show on Apple Podcasts, make sure you do. I read every single review as well as implement some of the advice and some of the comments that I receive on the reviews and just helps me improve the quality of the show and bring you the guests and the content that you want to hear. So I will really appreciate if you take 2 minutes out of your day, read and review the show. It just really helps me understand what you want and helps me understand how I can improve and make this show the best show it can be for you. So without further ado, let's jump right into the conversation with Mark today. Welcome to the Engineering Our Future Podcast, a podcast where I bring you relevant content from personal experience and guests to help young engineers, students, and international students succeed in their careers. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Engineering Future Podcast. Today I have Mark with me. He's an author, professor, and he's doing some amazing things with his career. A lot of great knowledge from his book, a lot of great knowledge from all the things he's doing. So I just wanted to chat with him and just learn more about his book and all his career endeavors. So Mark, do you just want to give us a little overview of some of the things you're doing? Maybe touch a little bit about the book. I'm really interested in hearing more about that.
Sure. Thank you for having me on the show. Let me give you a little about my career background and what I do as an engineer and why I decided to write the book. So my background, I came out of MIT back in the 1990s. I have degrees in EECS, also in physics, and a graduate degree in cryptography. And I started as a software developer and got involved with tech startups. And I've been working in my career, traditional startups, big companies who want to play startup, moved up the ranks, and I've been a CTO for a number of years, a chief technology officer. So I run teams of engineers. But along the way, I made some interesting discoveries. When I knew I wanted to be a CTO, said, okay, I have to be a good engineer. In my case, I needed to know about coding. That's whatever type of engineering you do. But you also need to have other skills. To be the head of your engineering team, you need leadership. You need to know how to communicate, not just with other engineers, but people outside of engineering. You have to understand how to hire the right people, how to do a budget. And nowhere in our classes did they ever teach us any of this. Now, I began to explore it because I realized to be a CTO, I needed to learn these skills, and I set out to learn them. This is before we had wonderful podcasts like this, before there was a lot of content on the web. So I had to use more archaic methods, things called books.
Yeah.
And I began to explore. Then I realized as I developed on my own, and I would interview other people, I'd say, okay, how would you do this technical problem? And they'd give me the right answer. So great, they took the right engineering classes. But then I would ask them, what makes someone a good teammate? How do you know who to hire beyond who can give you the right answers? And I'd get these blank stares. They had no idea. Now, in fairness, I had no idea either until I started trying to explore this. And I realized this wasn't just my own shortcoming. This is universal in engineering. Around the same time, MIT was discovering the same thing. There are all these skills that companies were saying, this is what we're looking for. Yes, they need good engineers, but they want people who are strong in leadership, communications, negotiation, networking, good teammates. We're not teaching this in school. So MIT was trying to put together this program. I got connected to them and said, I've been working on this in the real world. Can I be of any help? So I wound up helping them to develop the program. I've then gone back and I've taught in it for the past 20 years. And after doing this for decades, I know it's not just MIT students who need this. In fact, it's not just engineers who need this. We can all benefit from these skills. So I put it into a book, and that's what got released back in January of 2021, forgetting what year this is. And it's there to help engineers and non-engineers alike develop these skills, because it's not just about getting the right answer with your engineering, but how we can apply that answer effectively within our organizations.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you started with that, because that's kind of one of the things I like to talk about here on the podcast, just realizing that there are some additional skills beyond just technical skills that we need to learn as engineers and as young professionals that we are not really taught in school. For me, it was really surprising when I graduated and started to work in the industry, learning how to manage even a small team. It was something completely new to me, and that's something I wish I had learned during school, and that's something I wish I had at least practiced when I was an engineer or a student, I mean. And I think that's kind of where your book comes into play, because if I remember correctly, you wrote this book basically for students at MIT to teach them kind of some basic skills about career. What was some of the other motivation behind just writing the book and kind of creating this content? I know there is an app that goes along with the book. Just talk us through that mental process.
Sure. It's not just for engineering undergrads. It's
Right.
Certainly they need it. I know I needed it when I was in that position. But it really is, I've helped people throughout their careers, engineers, non-engineers, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, because no one is learning these skills. Think about networking, right? We have all heard, networking, it's so important. We've heard that many times. Our parents, our teachers, our peers in the office, everyone says networking is important. But at no time did anyone sit us down and say, let's talk about how to actually network, right? They just hope you kind of pick it up through osmosis. And that's unfortunately how we get lots of skills, and it's not sufficient. Even you mentioned becoming an engineering manager. Unfortunately, what we do is we say, hey, you're a good engineer. And yeah, I think you've got management potential. So congratulations, you're a manager. But most of the time, they don't sit you down and say, by the way, as a manager, all those great skills that got you to where you were, being the top engineer, being the fastest at getting the answer, the most clever answer, still very useful, but nowhere near sufficient, because now there's a whole bunch of different problems you have to solve. And the engineering part's actually the easiest. It's the people part of management. That's the difficulty. Mm-hmm. And we never even sat you down to warn you about that. I've seen a lot of managers get hit with it. So the book really is for a broader audience. You asked about the app. Now, one thing that I found from my own experience taking classes and reading and in teaching for years is we, of course, all forget things, right? I remember back in school, 2 minutes after you walk out of that last final, you forgot half of the course, right? And when you read a book, you say, oh, that's really interesting. But 3 weeks later, you forget it. In school, we know when and where to apply what we're learning. How do we do this problem set? Here's a hint. It's the formula the professor wrote on the board last week, right? Mm-hmm. We knew where it belongs. In the real world, no one says, Oh, by the way, next Tuesday at 3:17 p.m., you need to lead, right? Oh, there's a network opportunity next Thursday night, right? It's not always so obvious to us. And so you need to keep this top of mind. But of course, a book, we don't carry it with us. We're not walking around going, oh, let me look and refresh on this. So what I've done, I've taken a lot of the information in the book and I've put into this free app. And what it does, no one even wants to open an app, and that's okay, you don't have to. The app is going to give you a daily reminder. So think of it like a daily affirmation, but instead of telling you you're wonderful, which of course you are, it's going to remind you of one of the things you read in the book to help reinforce it and keep it top of mind. But then, of course, if you do have, say, a networking event coming up, you can also open the app and quickly browse through it and go, oh, right, yeah, okay, well, here's what I'm supposed to do when networking. So you can use it either way. But really, in general, when we think about the learning we have, not just my book, but any book, any course, we need to take that content and move it out from between the pages and make it available when and where it is useful to us. And so I think we're going to see a lot of changes in how we deliver and consume content in the future.
Yeah, that's super true. And I know, I mean, for us young engineers and students, having an app on our phone, which we have always with us, is super important, especially for these events, and just having kind of the information just really accessible. It's invaluable to just have that right there on our phones. Something that I always struggle with, and I know a lot of engineers do, a lot of young engineers and students do, is how to create a career plan, because it's so hard to look 5, 10 years ahead of us when you are just starting your career, maybe 1 or 2 years out of school. How can we better plan for the future and create a career path that is going to be fulfilling and it's going to bring us the most value out of our major that we worked so hard to get?
Career plans are so important. I have seen far too many people who say, well, this is the job I want to get to, whether it's that next promotion or that job down the road, but they just don't know how to get there. And what's really sad is no one teaches you how to plan. I've even heard people say, oh, you can't really plan for your career. It just kind of happens. But now let's think about our work. Have you ever had any project, even your summer internships, where they said, okay, we've got 3 months to build this project. Let's not bother with a plan. Let's just kind of see where things go and hopefully it will wind up well, right? No engineer has ever done that. We know we need plans, right? We need project plans. We need timelines. We need who's going to work on what. How's this all going to come together? Now, we also know it's never going to work out exactly as we planned it, right? There's always going to be some things that come up and change it, and that's okay. So when we think about our life, I mean, this is a project that's going to last you decades. You better have a plan. And now, just like our project plans, you want to be clear, what's that long-term goal? What are the steps? Let's backtrack. What are the steps to get there? If I want to be here in 10 years, where do I need to be in 7 years or 5 years, right? I have to be kind of closer to it. You don't have to have an exact path. You're not planning out 10 years of work, but you're saying, yeah, here's the direction I'm going. Now, the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, that's going to be a lot more concrete. You better have an idea of what you're working on now. So you're going to start from this long-term goal and backtrack, and you're going to create this plan, and you're going to get input from other people, because just like our work plans, you don't have to do it in isolation. Get feedback from other people, and then course correct, then adjust. And that's whether you say, you know what, I thought I wanted to do this, change of plans, I want to do that. Or you discover, there's a different path, right? We sometimes get these engineering aha moments, like, oh, wait, I could do this differently. That happens with our path. Or sometimes things just happen out of our control. No one was expecting a pandemic. It had a massive impact on our careers, on our businesses. That's life. And so you constantly readjust your plan to get you to where you want to go in light of the reality that you face.
Yeah, super important. One, to realize that it's important to plan and it's important to stick to the plan. But a lot of times that is not the case. And obviously the pandemic kind of threw us for a loop with work, with every plan that I could have possibly had planned. But it's always fine to just switch lanes or switch path and careers kind of early on. And that is something that I did just because of different circumstances. I actually started in building design, and now I'm in bridge design, which is two completely different careers. but it's kind of trying to adjust that career plan that is going to kind of guide us towards our ultimate goal. And that's kind of important to keep in mind. And I always think that it's really important to realize why we want to do things. How we do it is kind of a matter of the plan kind of occurring as we go along. Um, so for engineers that are wanting to work at a company where they know they're going to be there for many, many years, how can they find the company that is going to bring them the most value for their careers? I know this is something that it's a lot of people are obviously trying to find jobs during this time. How can they better gear their plan towards a company that is going to bring them the most value based on what they want to be doing?
So two good questions. So one is in general, how do we find companies that give us a long-term plan or align to our long-term
Right.
plan? And second has to do with coming out of college. I want to make sure we address that. But let me start with the first one. When I was first out of school, I took a job as a software engineer, and I didn't have much of a plan at this time. And then one day my boss came in, called me into his office, and he said, so this may be a surprise. I'm leaving the company today. We've had a falling out. I'm going to go start my own company. I'm taking some of these engineers with me. Would love it if you'd come with me. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it's nice. He said, I'd like for you to join. That's nice validation. Meanwhile, the other founders who were staying said, hey, we know this guy's leaving. He's taking some folks. Probably asked you, we want you to stay. We think you're valuable. Oh, no, okay. Well, that's nice. Boy, I have a decision to make, right? How do I even think about this? Right? And it really comes down to how we think about any two jobs or job opportunity. You have to have some evaluation function, right? This is a particular engineering term. I wouldn't use this with others, right? How do you know your project worked? Well, we have success criteria, right? We know it's sufficiently small or fast or whatever the metrics are. So you want to create that for yourself. And once I created those metrics, I realized, wait, there's more than two jobs here, because this was the 90s with the dot-com era. So I went and looked at other jobs and found an even better opportunity and shifted there. So what we want to do is think about in that career plan, what is it we want? Not just today, but even down the road. And that might be money, that might be opportunity, certain types of projects that you want to work on. It could be the opportunity for growth, could be lifestyle. We all know some companies are known for 60, 80-hour work weeks. Some are, hey, we're very strict 9 to 5. That may or may not be important to you. So you want to understand what does matter to you and what that path is going to look like, not just today, not just that first job, but as you grow in the company. And it's perfectly acceptable to say, hey, if I join, what will things look like for me 5 years down the road? Now, if it's a big company like Halliburton or Microsoft, okay, they should be able to give you an answer. If it's some tiny startup of 20 people, the answer is, well, hopefully we're still in business and maybe we've even been sold and who knows what the new owners want to do. So you'll have to recognize they may have better or worse answers depending on their size. But it's okay to ask, hey, walk me through a career path. Tell me what the options are. Companies will like that because it shows you're thinking about the future with them. Now, we briefly touched upon everyone now who's in school, and particularly right now with the pandemic, people are saying, oh my God, this is really difficult. This industry is doing well or not doing well. And I've seen, this is my third recession now. Unfortunately, I've seen people make these short-term mistakes where they say, oh, right now as I'm graduating, this industry is not doing well. It's hard to find jobs, so I'm going to go somewhere else. And now I recognize you might have constraints. You might say, look, I've got school loans, I have family obligations, I need to get income. I can't sit around another 6 months. I have to take this or the better paying job. But recognize once you start going down that path, options will start to close. Now, they're not going to close in a year or two. You can switch back. But if you're down that path 5 years, 10 years down the road, it's a lot harder to do that career transition. And so you want to be conscious of this. And again, it's okay if you say in the short term, I know it's not what I want, but I need these opportunities, this income, but make sure you then plan a path to get you back on the path you want to go to as the economy starts to improve.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned those two stories because that's something I kind of have lived through. Not the fact that we're in a recession and trying to find a job, but when I was a student, as an international student, it's just really hard to find jobs basically outside of college because there is a lot of restrictions. There's just a lot of limitations for us international students. So I basically had to work jobs that I did not like, and that was basically all I could get at that time. It was paying for my food, it was paying for rent, so I was happy to work there for a little while, at least until I could find a job. And this is something I've talked plenty of times here on the podcast and written about and everything. But the skills that I learned at those jobs were crucial to the success that I have right now because you learn all sorts of skills when you are fixing furniture, and I'm not talking about like your crafting skills, but like you're working in teams, you're communicating with people, you are sometimes even leading small teams, and those skills are really important, especially that early on in the career, because once you become an engineer, it's kind of harder to perfect those skills early on because you are way into the technical skills kind of early on. So I thought that was interesting that you mentioned that. The second story was interesting. Just this past year, just before the pandemic started, I had to switch jobs because the company I was working on, some of the engineers, the project managers of the company decided to start their own company, and they basically took the whole team, and it was just like the owner of this company and me left. So I had to switch jobs for that reason. So it was kind of interesting you mentioned those two stories, and it's unfortunate that sometimes that happens, but those are the experiences and the lessons that we need to learn. And I always try to see the positive side on everything that happens. And those first jobs were obviously not the greatest, but I was working on all these skills that I now have and have helped me do great things in engineering. So I always tell people that it is okay to work in those jobs at the beginning, and it is okay to change careers early on. But as you said, the longer you stay in those careers, the harder it's gonna be to come back and work on the thing that you really want. So I always tell people just to keep that in mind as they navigate their career, especially kind of early on. Something I wanted to ask you is, we talk about career plan, how to better plan for the future, find these companies, and kind of build our career and better plan for it. How can practicing active and proactive career planning early on in our career can make us a better engineer in the future, as well as a better leader within the company or in society in general?
When you make a career plan, what you want to do is consciously think about what you need to be successful in the future. Think about your college career right now. At some point, you said, okay, I want to get this degree. Well, what do I need to do to get that degree? Now, this is pretty easy. Your school lays out, well, here are the courses you need to take. And what are you doing? You're saying, okay, well, this semester I'll work on this course. Next semester I'll take that course. Sometimes there are prereqs, right? You can't jump into the 400 level class without doing a few others. And you've mapped out this plan. If you didn't have that, you might just think, well, college, I guess I'll just take some classes, next semester take some more. Hopefully one day I can go to the registrar and say, hey, did I qualify for the degree? Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, well, I guess I got to take more classes and hope I get lucky, right? But you're consciously saying, here are the skills I need to build. Now, in this case, those skills are specific classes of knowledge. When you think about your career, it's also, well, I need to learn how to use this new tool. I need to learn to work on this type of project or this scale of projects. There's going to be more engineering skills you need, but then there are other skills, developing your leadership, developing the ability to communicate. All of this is going to go and help you be more effective. And let me share with you an analogy, because we often think, okay, it's about the engineering. And in fact, in school, we work in such a narrow area where there are yes and no answers, right? It's right and wrong. It's just about doing the math. We know that we've all met the engineers. Some of us, myself included, have been the engineer who has terrible social skills, but hey, they really get the right answers. We know they're smart. And in school, that's all that matters, right? Getting as many answers as you can on the test. But you're not going to be as effective in your career without some of these other skills. Think about that brilliant professor who everyone knows, yeah, he's a genius, he gets all these research grants, but oh my God, he's a terrible lecturer. We hate his class. He's so hard to follow. He rambles, he's disorganized. Thinking, I know he's smart. Everyone says this and he's well respected, but it's just a pain to listen to him. How much is his career hurt by not having those skills? How much better could he be if he has it? So let me give actually a engineering analogy here. Imagine you have a rectangle. We're going back to middle school math. You've got a rectangle. It's 4 by 10. And you have to increase one of the sides by 2 units to maximize the area. So either 4 to 6 or 10 to 12. Now, I'm sure all of you are saying, oh, yes, I remember this. Okay, 4 to 6. I want to increase that short side. That gives us 60 units. All right, good for you. You did the math. What does this have to do with our careers? What happens, conceptually, what happens when we do that? What we're doing when we're adding those 2 units to the short side, those 2 units get amplified by that long side, right? By those 10 units. Whereas if we add 2 to the long side, it only gets amplified by the 4 units. All of us have short sides and long sides. Now, we're all long in engineering. We might not be as long in our leadership, in our communication, certainly not in accounting or maybe other areas. But if we can focus a little on these short sides, it's not about being the world's best communicator, but it's about that professor going from horrible to listen to, okay, I can listen to this guy for an hour. Think about all the times you're going to present in your career, whether it's to other teammates, whether it's to other people at the company, whether it's going out to a conference and trying to elevate your own brand within your career. Public speaking is going to be helpful. You don't have to be the world's best public speaker, but going from not so great to, okay, you're passable, or even, hey, you're not bad, makes you so much more effective. It takes that great long side you have and gets it out and makes it more useful. Now, I picked public speaking, but this applies to all these other skills we have. Now, as engineers, we have to keep developing that long side. I know in my industry, in software, I'm using technologies that didn't exist 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. If I wasn't developing, if I wasn't paying attention, I'd quickly get out of date. So keep working on that long side. But when you think about what's going to maximize your ROI, shave off some of that time and put on the short side, any of these many short sides we have, and that's going to give you a much better return on investment and make you overall more effective by maximizing our overall area.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I've never heard or thought about it that way, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I think engineers that are able to communicate well, that are able to write and just share their knowledge, at least seem to society that are smarter, quote unquote smarter, because they are able to communicate the designs better than someone that is super technical and is just at the office just doing the calculations. And for me, I think volunteering with engineering organizations have been a great way to develop those skills. Obviously, creating this podcast, talking to people, communicating has been invaluable just to perfect my speaking skills, especially since I come from Colombia. English is my second language. A lot of troubles kind of when I came to the US almost 10 years ago. Speaking, I'm an introvert. Basically, everything against me in terms of speaking, but I think it's just learning to communicate better and understanding that in engineering, despite people thinking it's just a very technical profession, there's a lot of communication involved. You have to talk to clients, you have to write proposals, you have to do all this communication and soft skills that are not really, again, taught in school or even mentioned that are important for our careers. What are some of the things you've seen engineers or even yourself do to improve these skills? For me, it's been volunteering organizations, being part of groups that are helping me develop these skills. What are some of the things you have done or seen other people do?
There are a number of ways you can work on these skills, and certainly volunteer work helps. Asking for projects, working with your manager and HR teams and saying, hey, I want to work on these skills. You can listen to great podcasts, you can read books, you can take courses, and it will vary depending upon your style, right? Some of us prefer reading or listening and just absorbing information. Some of us are a little more hands-on. But one thing to remember, particularly as we're talking about whether we call them soft skills, power skills, firm skills, but these other skills, not the technical knowledge, is that it is different from our knowledge learning. So if you think back to school, we sat there. I remember in my physics classes, my professor just going up to the board and just writing equation after equation. And for an hour, she would stand there writing these down, and we're all frantically scribbling, trying to keep up. And that's how we learned physics, right? Watching someone else derive equations and hoping somehow we memorized it. And that was, well, we'll say sufficient. That also works for economics. That works for chemistry. That works for knowledge transfer. Obviously, we want to have some field experience. Chemistry, you should take the lab. Physics, we had labs. Engineering, you should actually have labs. And you do, but it's a lot of knowledge transfer. It's one person with knowledge saying, I am going to tell you this is how to do it. And the rest of us say, okay, now I understand. And that's great for knowledge transfer. When it comes to these other skills, it's not as simple. When I teach these skills to MIT students, they want to go in and say, okay, what's the formula for leadership? What's the algorithm for networking? I'm just going to scribble it down, just like my physics equation. And then I'll have it in my notebook and I'll just memorize it and I'll be great at it. But of course, there is no formula or algorithm. These are complex ideas and they have multiple solutions. Now, the way we teach this to our students at MIT, it's the same way that's taught in business schools, which is a peer collaborative learning environment. So the way it's taught is not someone like myself stands up and says, and do this and you're a leader. It's let's look at this situation. Let's think about, here are some aspects of leadership. So we put some information out there, we seed some ideas, and then we get everyone having a discussion. How would you approach this? How would you approach it? What's the way you think about it? Why do you agree or disagree? Because there's not always a right answer. And by having multiple perspectives, it's kind of like as engineers, if we have multiple approaches to solving a problem, we're more effective engineers, right? We know there's no golden hammer and this solves all our problems. We have a toolkit of multiple tools to solve our engineering problems. Same thing when it comes to our leadership problems or negotiation problems. You want to have multiple approaches. Now, you're going to prefer a certain way that's going to correspond to your style, but just knowing there's other things out there that you can use when needed, or recognizing other styles other people employ, that's going to help make you more effective. So the best way to learn these skills is to form a cohort, form other people, other students you're with in school, other people in your company, or just other people you find. You can always go start just a meetup group or some local club or organization in your community and say, we're going to tackle these skills together. We're going to use a book, a podcast, articles, some type of content to seed, hey, here's what we're learning about today. But make sure you have that peer discussion. That is where the learning comes in. That is the key part of this. And you can do this on your own. It's how schools have done for years. You don't need the professor or school if you can get the content yourself, but create that group for peer learning.
Yeah, that again, engineering is a very technical profession, but I think without a team, it's impossible to be an engineer because there's so many things that go into a project. And again, learning the soft skills also require teams to practice, to collaborate, to get different perspective. Growing your network, like we talked at the beginning, is super important to have a wider variety of people and input with different perspective, different backgrounds that is just going to enhance our experience and just enhance our skills. And I know I've seen that tremendously since I came to the US and just being volunteering with all these organizations with people that are the same age to me, to managers that are 20, 30, 40 years ahead of me, and just hearing the different perspective is just super important. So we talked about how to develop our career plan, how that will make us a better engineer, a better leader, and how all these skills that we need to develop, how to develop them with volunteering and with just finding a group of people that are going to enhance our skills. How can we, after we develop all the skills, and something that is, I think is really important to differentiate is, what's the difference between someone that is a leader and someone that is a manager? Those positions that are commonly seen as the same, but I know there's a lot of differences. What are those differences in your opinion?
I'm going to describe it from an academic standpoint, right? From like the theory behind it. Now, in practice, they do merge and it's a blurry line between them. But it's important to understand what is the root core. And even more important is understanding it's something we need to do from day one. You don't say, well, this is a skill only for a manager, only for a leader. The skills that leaders and managers use, you should be using your first day on the job. And even if you say, I want to stay an individual contributor, I never want one of those senior positions, no problem. Learn these skills anyway, because they're going to help you. So let's talk about what they are and then how you're going to use them. Management is about figuring out how to achieve some goal, right? That is your project plan. That is delegating tasks, how you divide it up, what's the approach to solving it. That is almost very tactical. Leadership is about figuring out what that goal should be, right? And saying, hey, we should go in this direction as opposed to that direction, and convincing other people to go along with that. I say convincing. We think of leaders, they're in senior positions and they say, we're doing this. If you don't like it, you're fired. That is not leadership. That is authority. That is do this or else you don't get paid. Now, authority has its place, but that's not true leadership. True leadership is influential. It's not commanding. So now you're thinking, okay, well, I'm day one on the job. I'm just out of school. I'm not either of these. But you're going to use the skills. Anyone can be a leader because it's not positional. It's about saying we should go in this direction. Any of us can say, let's go in this direction. And if you can convince other people, you have now stepped up and been a leader. And of course, who do we want on our teams? We want people to say, I have an idea. We should do this, and here's why. We love those people. Even your managers is a poor manager or leader who says, no, all the decisions have to be mine. If you find yourself in that situation, start looking for a new job. The good ones say, yeah, I can't make all the decisions. That's why I have you brilliant people on my team, because you're going to come up with the good ideas. As for management, now you're not going to be saying, hey, you're going to work on this and you're going to work on this. Again, that's authority. But anytime you've done any project with any other person, you know you've had to say, how are we going to figure this out? Okay, why don't you do this and I'll do that? Oh, hey, someone's stuck over here. Okay, what can we do to get that person unstuck, or to work around, or to replan what our timeline looks like? Those are all management skills. It's not from authority, but anytime you've worked with any other person, even as a peer, you've used management techniques. So work on developing these skills. They're going to make you more effective, even if you say, I only want to stay as an individual contributor.
Yeah, that's super important. Yeah, again, a lot of times we see manager as leaders, but a lot of times that's not the case. And I always like to think that a leader is a lot of times a manager, but a manager is not a lot of times a leader. I don't think it's mutually exclusive, because, as you said, a manager is kind of a position that you earn with years with experience at a company, but a leader is more of influencing people and convince them to do things towards a common goal. So I think it's just very important to differentiate the two and just have an open mind of who do you want to become and how what do you want to do with your career. And I know you have brought a lot of perspective with your book and with all the knowledge you have shared with us today. And I just want to just ask you, kind of just give us a little overview of the book. I know it's a great book. There's a lot of great topics in there, but just to end this episode, just kind of give us a little overview of the book and some last thoughts of how can we have a better career toolkit.
Sure. Let me break down what's in the book. It's in 3 sections. The first one is on career. And so it's how to create a career plan, how to work effectively, skills like managing your manager, or understanding the corporate culture you're going to be in, and then how to interview. Now, most of us see, okay, here's how I can interview as a candidate. Your career offices are helping with that. Most people never learn how to interview as a hiring person. And all of us are going to be involved in hiring. But even as a candidate, if you understand how the other side is thinking, you're so much more effective. It's like seeing the playbook of the other team you're playing in sports. Isn't that really helpful and insightful? So that's the first section. Second section is on leadership and management. Management, I break down people management and process management. Those are two aspects, and they both need to be thought about. Again, even if you've never had a plan to be in a manager position, these skills will help you as an individual contributor. And then the third section are fundamental skills: communication, negotiation, networking, and ethics. That last one's so rarely talked about, but of course, we as engineers are building tools and systems, whether they are weapons, whether it's social media that gets weaponized. Everything we do, every knife can be used to save a life by a surgeon or take a life by a criminal. And we as the makers of these tools need to understand that. You can learn more about the book at thecareertoolkitbook.com. That's the website. You can, of course, buy it at Barnes & Nobles and Amazon and local bookstores everywhere you can think of. If you go to the website, you can download the app. There are links to both Google and Apple. I'll take you there so you can download the free app. There's other free resources, including how to create one of these learning groups, links to other books and resources that can help you develop your career. And you can follow me on social media or get in touch. thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll link it on the description of the show and on the website. I'm excited to. I actually haven't read the book, but I'm excited to start reading it and applying all the great knowledge you have shared in the book. Something you mentioned caught my attention, and it's something I just talked about here in the podcast a little while ago, and was the topic of ethics. And ethics is super important in engineering. I mean, we all know like the order of engineering. We all should pursue a career that is ethical. And a lot of times the line is very fine, and we need to be very aware of how we can better understand the ethics behind our career. So if people haven't listened to that episode, I'd really encourage you. I'm going to link in the description below, but it's a great episode, just sharing knowledge from another engineer from the East Coast, and he just talks about some examples of good practice in engineering, a really messy problem in structural engineer that turned to be something that the engineer decided to be in good ethics, and it's just a great example. And then the other episode is just about a unfortunate situation where an engineer is kind of tied into a messy situation, and he was not very ethical. So really interesting topic. Ethics is just a topic that we don't talk enough in engineering, but it's something that we all should really understand, and that's why we have different codes of ethics and different resources to kind of help us understand the background of ethics. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming to the podcast. It's been great talking to you. I just have one last question for you, and that's how can we continue engineering our future?
It is by proactively thinking about what is our goal and then using the tools at hand to create a path to get there. It's the same thing we do with our engineering problems. We just need to apply it to our careers and our life.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I'm excited to learn more about the book. If the listeners and everyone want to find the book, they can reach out to you or just get more knowledge from you. Go to the website. A lot of great resources there too. The app is fantastic. I downloaded and just kind of scroll through all the different quotes, and it's really easy to use. It's a fantastic app. So I just encourage people to get the book, read it, apply it, all the great knowledge you're sharing. Where can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about the book? Obviously, the website is a great place, but where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, the website is probably the best way to do it, thecareertoolkitbook.com. There's a contact form on the site, so you can message me directly. You can also try to catch me on social media. I don't follow those messages quite as often, so I recommend the form on the website, but those are probably the best ways to reach me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast, and it was great getting to know you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there you have it. That was a conversation with Mark today. He has some amazing insight, like I told you. Hopefully this episode really helps you find that passion and find that career plan that is going to lead you to the best results, and find a job that you are fulfilled, you're challenged, and you feel like you're growing into your career, as well as finding the experience that is really going to make you the best engineer you can be. In this show, that's my mission here. Bring you this type of guests, bring you content that is going to be very relevant and applicable on a day-to-day basis, so you can improve. And honestly, I've been learning a ton just from doing this show, from talking to these kind of guests, talking with some amazing people, kind of expanding my knowledge and opening my mind to new ideas, to new concepts, and overall just bringing everything together here on the podcast. So thank you so much for coming back. Again, if you haven't written and reviewed the show, please do. It really helps me, really helps the show get the word out there and find a new audience and just grow the podcast, which is basically what I'm after, providing you a lot of value and providing you with the best information that I can. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, I'd really encourage you to do so. I've been sharing some amazing content. I'll be sharing a lot more since I just finished the PE a few weeks ago, and I'm just kind of putting everything together, creating a few blog posts, putting my resources kind of together, and I'll be sharing everything for free. And you can just use it as much as you want. If you're taking the PE here in the next few months, if you are thinking about taking the PE in a few months or a few years. The content that I put together was, I think, a pretty comprehensive summary for the structural depth part, and I'm sure there's a lot of other resources out there that have some amazing information. I got a few books from PPI, which is a podcast partner. If you go to luisfelipeduque.com/PPI, you find that link in the description below. You're able to get some great discounts from them. They have a lot of courses, a lot of books, and a lot of information for the PE and the FE exam, and I honestly use a few of the books, the Civil Engineer Reference Manual, as well as the Structural Engineer Reference Manual from them, and found it super useful. All the content was pretty well laid out, and those were kind of my main two references when I was taking the exam. So check them out. They have a lot of great content, a lot of great resources for taking the PE, the FE, and I think the SE and other exams as well. So overall, a great platform for students and young engineers that are looking into getting those exams, preparing for those exams. So I just want to end with a thank you. This show has been growing tremendously. A lot of great guests, a lot of great information, receiving a lot of great feedback, and it's all because of you. It's all because you have provided me with this platform to share my ideas and share content, talk to these guests, and overall just create a space for young engineers and and students to feel represented, feel like they are not alone on this journey. And honestly, if you have questions, if you have feedback, reach out to me on social media, send me an email, go to the website and contact me that way. I'm always open to new ideas, to new guests, and overall just bring you the best information I can. So that's it for today. Again, thank you, Jack Winders, for the music. I'll talk to you in the next one. But for now, let's continue engineering our future.